Everything changes the moment you hear this. Not because someone told you the truth, but because someone who once walked away from you became desperate enough to search for answers they couldn't find on their own. You have no way of knowing it yet, but a question spoken in complete secrecy has started a chain of events that reaches farther than either of you imagined. They thought they were looking for clarity about your troubled life together. Instead, they uncovered something that refused to stay buried, and what they heard left them unable to think about you the same way again. You believed the story had already ended. You told yourself that enough time had passed, that silence meant acceptance, and that every unanswered question would eventually fade into memory. But some connections refuse to disappear simply because people stop speaking. They remain hidden beneath ordinary days, waiting for one unexpected moment to rise back to the surface. While you were trying to move forward, someone from your past was quietly searching for meaning, and the reason behind that search was far more personal than you realize. Imagine someone carrying a weight they cannot explain. Every new relationship feels incomplete. Every attempt to forget somehow circles back to the same memories. They convince themselves it is coincidence. They blame nostalgia. They tell themselves it will pass. Yet the feeling only grows stronger, until they finally decide to ask someone they believe might offer a different perspective. They weren't searching for magic. They were searching for peace. But the answers they received opened a door they never expected to see. As they listened, they began replaying every conversation you ever shared. Moments they once dismissed suddenly carried new meaning. The arguments that seemed pointless. The laughter that arrived when neither of you expected it. Even the painful silence after everything fell apart started looking different through fresh eyes. What they believed was simply an ending began to resemble an unfinished chapter, and that possibility unsettled them more than any certainty ever could. Meanwhile, your own life has been changing in quiet ways. You have fought battles that few people truly understand. There were nights when you questioned your strength and mornings when getting out of bed felt like its own victory. You learned to carry disappointment without letting it completely define you. Little by little, you became someone stronger than the version of yourself who once begged life for easy answers. You didn't notice how much you had changed, but change leaves an energy that others eventually feel. Sometimes the greatest transformation happens where nobody applauds. It happens when you forgive yourself without announcing it. It happens when you stop chasing people who cannot meet you halfway. It happens when you begin believing that your value exists even when nobody else recognizes it. Those invisible victories reshape your spirit, and somehow they echo farther than words ever could. Whether you believe in destiny or not, your quiet growth has been sending ripples into places you cannot see, and one of those ripples reached someone who thought they had already left you behind. The strange thing is that regret rarely arrives all at once. It appears in fragments. A familiar street. A favorite song. A random date on the calendar. A face in a crowd that resembles someone unforgettable. Piece by piece, memory builds a bridge back to emotions that were never completely resolved. Every ordinary moment becomes another reminder that some questions cannot be ignored forever. And eventually, even the strongest walls begin showing cracks. You have probably wondered why certain memories keep returning when you least expect them. You tell yourself you're over everything, yet something pulls your attention backward for reasons you cannot explain. Perhaps your heart isn't asking you to relive the past. Perhaps it is asking you to understand it. Understanding changes everything. It transforms pain into wisdom. It turns confusion into clarity. But before clarity arrives, life often asks you to sit in uncertainty just a little longer, because something important is still unfolding. The person who once believed they understood your story slowly realized they had only seen part of it. They remembered your struggles but overlooked your courage. They remembered the conflict but forgot your compassion. They focused on the ending while ignoring everything that came before it. Looking back through a different lens forced them to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves. That realization became impossible to escape, and it demanded a choice they had been avoiding for far too long. You may think time erases emotions, but time often does something much stranger. It strips away distractions until only what truly mattered remains. The things built on pride eventually collapse. The things built on fear lose their grip. What survives is usually the truth people tried hardest to avoid. That truth doesn't shout. It waits patiently until the noise fades. Then it speaks with a quiet certainty that changes everything. Still, nothing is ever as simple as it first appears. Even when someone recognizes their mistakes, uncertainty doesn't disappear overnight. Doubt asks difficult questions. Fear reminds them of old wounds. Pride whispers that reaching out might only reopen the pain. Every step toward healing feels risky because vulnerability always asks for courage before it offers peace. And right when they think about taking that step, life places one final challenge directly in front of them. At the same time, you stand at your own crossroads without fully realizing it. You are no longer the person who waited endlessly for someone else's decisions to determine your happiness. You have begun rebuilding pieces of yourself that once seemed permanently broken. Every lesson, every disappointment, every unexpected blessing has quietly reshaped your heart. The version of you emerging now carries a calm strength that wasn't there before. That strength will matter more than you know, because the next chapter demands it. There are moments when life feels strangely symbolic. You notice repeating numbers on clocks. You return to places you haven't visited in years. A conversation echoes words you've been silently thinking. Whether you see these moments as coincidence or simply reminders to pay attention, they invite you to pause. They ask you to look beyond appearances and wonder whether your journey has been leading somewhere all along. And just when you begin asking that question, another unexpected piece falls into place. The biggest surprise isn't that someone from your past has been reflecting on what happened. The real surprise is that you have changed so deeply that even if the past came knocking today, you wouldn't answer it the same way. You have learned that love without respect cannot survive. You have discovered that healing matters more than proving a point. You finally understand that your peace is worth protecting. That realization becomes the quiet light guiding every decision ahead, even as new possibilities begin appearing on the horizon. Then something happens that neither of you could have predicted. Information comes to light that challenges old assumptions. Conversations once remembered as failures suddenly reveal hidden acts of care. Choices once seen as rejection begin looking more like confusion than cruelty. The story you both believed for so long starts unraveling thread by thread. Every answer creates two new questions. Every revelation uncovers another layer waiting beneath it. You feel it before you fully understand it. A shift in the atmosphere. A calm before something significant. It's the same feeling you get just before sunrise, when darkness still surrounds you but the horizon quietly begins changing color. Nothing visible has happened yet everything somehow feels different. Deep inside, a small voice reminds you that endings and beginnings often arrive wearing the same disguise, and then, just as you believe you've finally uncovered the whole truth, one final revelation emerges from the silence. It has nothing to do with revenge, and everything to do with the hidden choices that were made when neither of you knew the full story. In that breathtaking instant, you realize the question that started this entire journey was never the one that truly mattered, because someone else has been holding a secret that could rewrite everything you thought you knew, and they are finally ready to speak, just as your future hangs on the next heartbeat. You were never supposed to hear this story. If you had found it one day earlier, it would have meant nothing. If you had waited one day longer, the truth hiding beneath the silence might have already changed everything. But somehow, at this exact moment, something pulled you here. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the part of your heart that never truly stopped asking why everything ended the way it did. Because somewhere, beyond the conversations you never heard and the questions you were never meant to know, your ex made a decision that nobody expected, and that decision opened a door neither of you can easily close. For the longest time, you believed the chapter had ended. You told yourself there was nothing left to discover. You replayed old memories until they lost their color, convincing yourself every answer had already been found. Yet deep inside, one question refused to disappear. Why did everything collapse when it felt like something real still existed beneath the pain? That single question followed you through quiet mornings and restless nights, growing louder instead of fading. Until an unexpected search for answers began somewhere you couldn't see. Imagine someone carrying invisible weight for months, pretending they had moved on while secretly wondering if they had misunderstood everything. Imagine them reaching a point where logic no longer comforts them, where every explanation feels incomplete. Desperate for clarity, they decide to seek a different perspective, hoping someone, anyone, can help them understand the tangled emotions they have been hiding. They walk into a quiet room believing they are searching for answers about you, but what they hear first isn't what they expected. The first words they hear don't bring certainty. Instead, they bring silence. The kind of silence that forces people to confront the parts of themselves they spend years avoiding. They expected to hear a simple story about blame, mistakes, or missed chances. Instead, they are asked a question so unexpected it leaves them speechless. Were they truly trying to understand your struggles, or were they trying to escape their own? That question lingers in the air long after the conversation moves on, and suddenly, nothing feels as simple as before. Meanwhile, your own journey has been unfolding without anyone fully appreciating how much you have changed. You have faced moments that seemed impossible. You have carried burdens nobody else could see. You smiled through days that felt heavier than anyone realized. Every setback quietly reshaped your spirit. Every disappointment carved deeper compassion into your heart. Even when you believed you were standing still, something inside you was becoming stronger, though the greatest proof of that strength was still waiting to appear. There are seasons when life feels strangely symbolic. You notice repeating numbers on clocks. Familiar songs appear at unexpected moments. Places you haven't visited in years suddenly enter your thoughts without explanation. Whether those moments are coincidence or simply reminders of your own reflections, they have a way of making you pause. They invite you to ask whether every ending is truly an ending, or whether some stories circle back in ways nobody can predict. As the conversation continues, your ex begins speaking about your difficult times. They remember moments they barely noticed while they were happening. They recall conversations they dismissed too quickly. Small details, once buried beneath frustration, suddenly return with startling clarity. What seemed insignificant then now feels impossible to ignore. Piece by piece, the story they built in their own mind begins to crack, revealing another version they had never allowed themselves to consider. The hardest truth is rarely about another person. It is about seeing yourself honestly. They begin recognizing how fear quietly shaped their decisions. Fear of vulnerability. Fear of rejection. Fear that love might require more courage than they believed they possessed. Those fears disguised themselves as certainty, convincing them to walk away while pretending it was the only choice. But fear cannot hide forever. Eventually, it grows tired of wearing confidence as a mask, and when that mask falls, everything changes. You may not know this, but healing has its own mysterious rhythm. It never follows the schedule you expect. Some wounds close quickly while others remain open until the exact lesson has been learned. You once believed your pain was only breaking you apart. Now, without fully realizing it, that same pain has been rebuilding you into someone capable of seeing life differently. The person staring back from the mirror today carries quiet wisdom the old version of you could never have imagined, and that quiet wisdom is beginning to affect people around you, your ex notices changes too, though not all at once. They hear about you through unexpected conversations. They remember your kindness instead of your arguments. They begin wondering whether they misunderstood your silence. Memory has a strange habit of rearranging itself when the heart becomes honest. Moments once forgotten suddenly glow brighter than they ever did before. Every recollection pulls another thread loose from the story they convinced themselves was true, until they are left standing before a truth they never expected to face. Hope is a delicate thing. It doesn't arrive with loud announcements. It appears quietly, almost shyly, asking only to be noticed. Sometimes it enters through forgiveness. Sometimes through understanding. Sometimes simply through realizing that people are more complicated than the labels we give them. You have spent so much time believing you needed every answer before moving forward. But perhaps moving forward is exactly what allows the answers to appear, though one final question still refuses to leave. What if the greatest misunderstanding between you was never about love at all? What if it was about timing, fear, and two people carrying wounds they didn't know how to explain? That possibility unsettles everything. It transforms old memories into new puzzles. Conversations you thought were finished suddenly feel unfinished. Choices that once seemed permanent begin looking surprisingly fragile, as though they could have changed with just one different moment. Your heart senses when something shifts, even if your mind cannot explain it. There are days when peace arrives for no obvious reason. There are mornings when old pain suddenly feels lighter. There are evenings when the future no longer seems frightening. Those quiet emotional changes are easy to overlook, yet they often mark the beginning of your deepest transformation. You are becoming someone who values truth over illusion, peace over chaos, and genuine connection over empty promises, and that transformation is impossible to hide forever. Meanwhile, your ex leaves that conversation carrying more questions than answers. Instead of certainty, they leave with reflection. Instead of blame, they leave with responsibility. Instead of seeing you only through the lens of the past, they begin wondering who you have become since your paths separated. That single thought follows them everywhere. It appears during ordinary,